go through This Is Your Life, James Morgan. Good afternoon to Broadway fans out there. Today I'm thrilled to finally, I tried to do a radio show with James, and we had a problem at the radio station. They had only one line, and impossible to have two people talk on one line. So now we have a Zoom, and we have everything. So this is James Morgan, who's world-renowned for creating many shows at the York Theater over 20 years. And we want to go back to your early days in Florida. Where does musical comedy come into your life in Florida?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And I've been a great admirer of you and your work for, well, as long as I've known of you. And before I knew you, I knew of you and was so impressed. And so when you started working with us to make shows of ours happen in recorded form, it was very exciting. So we appreciate the relationship over the years and also the recordings and support of all kinds. My beginnings in Florida, I was born in Fort Myers, Florida, in the very early 50s. But my parents, the only reason I was born in Fort Myers was because there was no hospital in Naples where my parents had moved. And I grew up in Naples. My parents had recordings of all the classic shows, which are still the classic shows, LPs. But my dad also had a great interest in Gilbert and Sullivan and Shakespeare and things like that. Words and music, songs. My mom was trained as a pianist, and was a piano teacher. Unfortunately, she tried to teach me and I refused. I just couldn't get excited about practicing, and I kick myself almost daily, particularly when I see someone sit down and play something wonderfully on the piano. I think, wow, I could have done that if I had just been smarter. But, hindsight is whatever it is. Anyway, so the combination of both their backgrounds instilled in me an appreciation for music and words put together to tell stories. Mom was in a couple of productions by the Naples Players, the local community theater group. There was not a drama program at our high school. I was involved in the band, so more music there. But somewhere in my high school years, they built a new library in Naples, and they got a big shipment of LPs. I don't know it wasn't all from one label, but there were a lot of Columbia records, which of course was the main producer of one of the main producers of original cast albums at that time. And having grown up knowing Rodgers and Hammerstein, Lerner and Lowe, all of that, I was fascinated to find shows in there that I'd never heard of, and to find out they were written by famous people, but they were unsuccessful, just began to fascinate me. Mr. President is one of the first ones I listened to, and I thought, Irving Berlin. And I wasn't smart enough at the time to say, this is not a very good show. There were things I liked, things I didn't like, and there's still the same things in it that I like and don't like. But I couldn't figure out someone who was as famous and well-known and talented, incredibly talented as Irving Berlin could write a show that didn't work. And then you begin to put it all together historically, where he was in his career, where the country was, all of that. And out of that became this fascination for shows that didn't work perhaps, or weren't given the best first chance, and an interest in giving a second chance to some of those shows, or at least re-examining it. Not everyone deserves to be done again, but many of them are fascinating fascinatingly unsuccessful, and figuring out why, how that happened, how Irving Berlin could write a show that just was not him at his best. And that all began to fascinate me. And as I got into college, I would just go to the library and read. I went to the University of Florida in Gainesville, and would just go to the library and look up things in this realm. I remember reading a famous article in the Saturday Evening Post called "Has anybody here seen Kelly?" about Kelly, that's on your label, Bruce.
And produced in your theater also.
Yes, yeah. Is your recording came after our?
No,
I think
before.
it came before.
They kind of yes used. That's how. Yes.
Really?
I think so. I think so.
Isn't Brian Darcy James on your?
Yes.
I think that came. He was in. Anyway,
maybe it was.
Check the dates. I think we did it, and then you did some of our cast.
Originally, Eddie Lawrence said, "Oh, I don't want to do all the songs." And I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Well, I like some of them more than others or something." And he had to be talked into recording pretty much the whole score.
And good. I'm glad you did. I remember him saying, telling me the horror stories about him being banned from the theater. And I forget exactly why. Oh, David Susskind didn't get along, the producer, the first time producer. But he said, somewhere there was talk about orchestrations. He said, yeah, I've had the entire orchestrations in my garage all these years. So I can pull them out if you want to do a full orchestra. I said, well, no, we can't afford to do a full orchestra. But it's hearing stories like that. We've gotten better at recording or archiving these stories. A lot of them like that are in my head, I think. I mean, we did talkbacks with Eddie after the show, I know, but whether they were recorded or recorded in any form that's findable or usable now, I don't know. And for that, I'm very sorry. But we've gotten much better about realizing the value of these talks that we have with people who created these shows and their stories about what happened and what went wrong. And a lot of the times people say, do you rewrite shows for the Mufti series? Absolutely, we do not, unlike certain other concert series around town. We rewrite them if the authors are alive and want to do something on it, or if there are notes from the authors saying, this is what we always wanted to do and weren't given the chance. And for example, we did a revised version of Darling of the Day, working from notes that Yip Harburg and Julie Stein had left. They had wanted to do a smaller production in London, which never happened. That we had the notes from them, or the estates had the notes, and Eric Hoganson worked from their notes to do that, to take out 2 songs and use 2 other songs as linking, or 1 other song as a linking piece throughout it, and to use 1 or 2 songs in a different way. There were new lyrics to a couple of songs with the estate's permission, and it worked wonderfully. So we do not just sit down and say, well, this needs to be fixed, let's get rid of this song. We don't believe in that. And I have too much. What fascinates me is what went wrong in some of these cases. How did it get so far off track? And sometimes it was the wrong producer who didn't have the power to, or didn't have the knowledge to say, no, let's not do this. Or one fascinating example is Dear World, that Jerry Herman always wanted to be a chamber musical, but Alexander Cohen was desperate to get it on. He had all the right people to do it and was excited about it, but he could only get the Mark Hellinger Theater, which of course now is a church and a gigantic, beautiful theater, but in no way would the show be a chamber musical in that space. So it was made bigger and bigger and bigger to fill that space. And everyone, including Jerry, talked about that's one of the things that went wrong, that it just got too big and it lost, the heart got lost in the spectacle. So we did a tiny production with Tyne Daly, and it was pretty darn spectacular on its own, just bare bones on our stage. We found when you let the material speak for itself very simply with wonderful actors, uh, with next to no production values, um, it can be pretty exciting.
Tell the listeners what length of time you have to get these shows up.
Well, it's changed over the years. Well, no, it hasn't changed actually. What the schedule has changed, but the amount of basic time to put the show together remains the same. They start rehearsal on Monday at 10 o'clock, and it used to be it would open Friday night at 8 after 5 or 4.5 days of rehearsal. A few years back, 5 or 6 years ago, we changed the schedule. So first rehearsal, and then the original schedule was 5 performances over that weekend, and it was all done by Sunday night. In 7 days was the entire package, rehearsal and 5 performances. And so it's just like bing, bing, bing. And amazing stuff happened in that time. But we always thought there was a bigger audience for it, and talked about it and figured out a few years ago how to do it. So now we start rehearsal on Monday. Dress rehearsal is Friday night. Then there are 2 previews on Saturday, 1 preview Sunday afternoon, and it opens on Sunday night. So by Sunday night at the opening, we have had 3 previews in front of audiences, and that makes an entire difference. It's not this deer in the headlights feeling there used to be about, oh my God, I don't even remember where I come on. It serves the material, the actors, and the process much better. And then we come back on Wednesday and do 7 more performances the following week. And so there's a time for the show to really grow in front of audiences and the actors to get pretty darn comfortable. Now, people who've never done it before, actors who've never done it before, still say, I can't believe you asked me to do this in this little amount of time. But then they talk to actors who did it on the original schedule, where it was truly a terrifying experience. And they realize how good they have it now. So it's a little, it's sort of like summer stock, actually. You know, you make quick decisions. You may say later, well, I really shouldn't have done that. But at that point, you have to make a decision. I'm going to play this character this way. And with a good, strong director who knows the piece and knows how to push it along, really wonderful things can come out of it.
Let's
I
go
lost my
back.
train of thought.
Let's
anyway.
go back a little. So, you study design in school, and that is your What was the hope?
I went to Florida because they had great programs in graphic design, architecture, and landscape architecture, all of which I was interested in. And it got to the end of my sophomore year where you had to declare a major, and evidently I couldn't. And I went to a counselor who said, but you're already working in the theater department, you're designing posters, you're painting scenery. Have you ever thought of majoring in theater? Now, I find it hard to believe that I had never thought of that at that point, but that's the story I remember. And so at that point, I decided I would major in theater with a specialization in set design. They didn't have a design degree. So it's a BFA in theater with a specialization in set design. And the good thing was it was a small department, so I got a chance to do a lot of stuff. Uh, I would like to think if I had known I was going to major in theater, I would have explored other places, but I didn't. I just stayed there. I was comfortable, all of that. And then in my junior year, decided I was going to move to New York for theater. And I did. I had relatives here, grandmother and an aunt and uncle. And I had been here a number of times. And I just decided that's what I was going to do. And that's here's where I wanted to live. And for better or worse, that's what happened. My connection to York came because my aunt, Mary Hamilton, she and my uncle Pete went to the Church of the Heavenly Rest. And after 3 or 4 months, I was doing various odd jobs, babysitting and painting kitchens and I forget, taking care of a couple of senior citizens. And I asked my aunt if they had any connections in theater that could be of use to me. And she said, well, we don't really know any people in theater. We know Marshall, and he had taken me to lunch at the Players Club. And she said, we don't really know anyone other than Mort, but there is this dear little theater group at the church. Maybe you'd like to meet the woman who runs it. And I thought, oh, community theater, that's just what I need. But I was polite, as I tend to be, and said, sure. And so the theater was the York Theater, at that time, the York Players. And the woman who runs it was Janet Hayes Walker, who founded it. And she became a very good friend. We met, she liked my design work and immediately asked me to design a poster. I worked backstage on a number of shows. And within 3 months, she had asked me to design my first set in New York, a production of Night Must Fall in the spring of 1975. And that was the beginning of my connection.
At this point, she had a background in musicals, but she didn't.
Absolutely.
Tell us what she.
Go ahead.
Anyone can whistle.
Well, yeah, but before that, her background was in music, classical. She was classically trained as a soprano. She had a degree from the New England Conservatory, and then she had studied in Paris with Nadia Boulanger. Oh. And that's where she met her husband, Charlie, who was the organist at the American Cathedral. And somewhere along the line, I think she came to the realization that making a living as a classically trained soprano would be difficult. And she ended up doing a number of Broadway shows, 7. The first one was Plain and Fancy, where she met Barbara Cook, became very good friends. She ended up understudying Barbara for the entire run of The Music Man. She was in Camelot, Anyone Can Whistle, as you mentioned, and I'm blanking. Oh, Damn Yankees. Quite a period of time in Damn Yankees. You can hear her on the recording of Anyone Can Whistle. A woman's place is in the home, a woman's place is on the shelf, and home is where she hangs his hat, and home is where he hangs himself. She's June in that section. And so that was, as we began, they weren't doing musicals at all when I got involved. And of course, that's what I was. She
thought it was just too difficult and complex compared to a play.
Yeah. And I nudged a little, and she wanted to do them. She was just nervous about how complex they were to put together. And I had never designed a musical, but I thought, wouldn't it be fun? And we came to find that we had very similar tastes in giving a second chance to shows that deserved it. Wonderful shows that had been overlooked for one reason or another. And she
So
decided,
what were the first shows that you did?
the first show, the first musical we did was She Loves Me, which at that time was looked at as a artistic success from Broadway, but not wildly successful in its original production, even though it was Al Prince's production and he directed it. It was looked at as, oh, this really nice show that really didn't take off, even though Barbara Cook was in it and all of that. And we did the first revival of it in New York, and it got a lot of attention. I remember Sheldon and Jerry coming to see it. And that was the beginning. And out of that, we did, some of our first shows were The Grass Harp, which we both loved. And both had a great fondness for. The Golden Apple. Oh, she had been in The Golden Apple, which was maybe the first show, one of the first shows to transfer from off-Broadway to Broadway. I didn't know it at all, and she introduced me to it, and it became a favorite of mine. We actually have done 2 full productions of it. And under current contracts, we couldn't afford to do it nowadays. It's too big. We were on a showcase contract then up at Heavenly Rest. And it's a fascinating...
Today, what is a good number for you in terms of 12, 13?
Well, we're mixing, I've mixed it up the conversation about muftis and full productions. Full productions are fully produced shows that run for 5 or 6 weeks, and sometimes even longer if they take off and can extend. Almost everything we do, with sometimes the exception of muftis, requires outside funding at this point. So if the funding is there for a main stage production, a full main stage production, we can have a cast of 13 to even 17. I think there were 17 in the cast of Storyville that we did 7 or 8 years back. Really wonderful piece by Mildred Caden and Ed Bullens, directed by Bill Castellino, and it had been done around the country for 30 years in various forms, almost becoming really successful and never really quite getting there. This is the first time it's seen in New York, and we did a lot of work to trim it down. We got it to 2 hours. I'd seen it a few years before, 2 years before at the San Diego Rep, and it was 3 hours long, which it just should not, it doesn't support it. There are very few shows that support being 3 hours long, and I'm not a big fan of sitting and sitting and sitting, however wonderful something is. And Storyville has much wonderful stuff in it, but it's not 3 hours worth of much wonderful stuff. Anyway, we got it down to 2 hours, and it was very, very successful. There's a lot of talk of doing something with it, and it, for one reason or another, didn't happen. That's for another discussion sometime. But anyway, I got off.
When did you start with Sondheim?
With what?
Sondheim.
Oh, our first show with him was 1979. Anyone Can Whistle. It was the first New York revival of that, and it got lots of attention. We did a wonderful talk about it in our show and tell conversation series about a little over a year ago. Brought the cast back together, and wonderful stories came out of that. And he saw it and really appreciated all the fond memories from everyone. Fran Soder directed it. Eric Stern was the music director, and we had some wonderful people in it. Rosemary McNamara, Gary Crawford, Gailey Byrne. It was a great cast, and we've ended up doing 10 Sondheim shows, which I still believe is one more than any other theater in New York City. and we've had a lot of success with them. Our second one was Pacific Overtures in 1984, which moved to the Promenade Theater, which is now a Design Within Reach store. But it played there for, I don't know, 7 months or something. A lot of wonderful attention. In today's world, or it's amazing it wasn't recorded. And today's world, it would have been. But it was just getting easier to make recordings at that time, I think. Anyway, that got a lot of attention. Our production of Company, the next one was Sweeney Todd in 1989, which moved to Circle in the Square and ran for 7 months. Became known as Teeny Todd by Forbidden Broadway. And Beth Fowler and Bob Gunton were the leads, with Jimmy Walton and who else? I'll think of the names that are met. A really wonderful cast, directed by Susan Schulman. And Michael Lichtenfeld choreographed it. David Crane was the music director, and it used the entire Circle in the Square space in a way that I think maybe was a first there, where it was really environmental. It was like London was surrounding you, and you were one of the denizens of London as an audience member. And again, it helped put our name on the map. Then a production of Company that almost moved commercially, that Susan directed. Production of Funny Thing Happened that Pam Hunt directed, and which also almost moved to the Edison Theater. It was sitting there empty, and there was a producer who decided he was going to move it there, and then the money didn't come together. Then 1994, we did Merrily We Roll Along at St. Peter's, and it was supposed to actually open at the Minetta Lane, and at the last minute, things changed, and it moved. It opened at St. Peter's, but the plan all along was to move it to Broadway, and with a producer who was learning his way as a full out, in charge of it all producer. And it was impossible to get a ticket. People lined up around the block trying to get them. And then the Times Review came. It was all set to go to Broadway, and the Times Review came out and said, well, you know, it doesn't really work, but this is the best production it will ever get. And this producer got cold feet, and it didn't move, and that was that. It was a really wonderful production. Malcolm Getz and Ann Bobby and all sorts of wonderful people. Directed by Susan Schulman, Michael Lichtenfeld choreographed. And anyway, so we've had a lot of wonderful experiences with Steve over the years. Most recent was in the Mufti series, a production of his first show, Saturday Night, which had been revived very successfully at Second Stage in a big production, I don't know, 15 or 20 years before we did it. And this was a simple Mufti production, and he said to me, this is the way this show should be done. It's a writer feeling his way, learning what he can do. It doesn't need, I don't know if he said it doesn't deserve, I think he said it shouldn't have a big production. This is perfect. It captures it. It tells the story wonderfully. And initially he said, I'm sorry, I can only come to the dress rehearsal. And he loved it so much, he came back and saw it again the week later, because it spoke to him. And that's the ultimate compliment when you've connected a writer to their work in a new way, or in the right way. Maltby and David Shire have said a number of times that we have given them their shows back, shows that either just hadn't gotten a lot of attention over the years or didn't get the right attention the first time out. When we did Big in the Mufti series, they were in awe of what that very simple production of it did. Richard said it was the best telling of that story. Richard and John Weidman, who wrote the book, said it was the best telling of that story he'd ever seen, and he would love for people to be able to see that archival video. And Closer Than Ever that we did, it was a full production. Excuse me. Of course, it had been very successful off Broadway in whatever year that was, early 80s, no, late 80s, at the Cherry Lane. And Richard directed this for us and did a beautiful job, and an all new cast. And it just took off. And then it was supposed to be a 5-week run, got so much attention from the critics and audiences, people who were coming to see it again because they loved it so much in the original production, or people who had just known it from the recording, and the recording spoke so much to them they came to see it. And then when we first had cast members have to leave for other commitments, we replaced them, and then we replaced them again and replaced them again. It ended up a 5-week run running for 5 months, which is one of the longest running shows we've done. But again, Richard and David said it was like a new life for this show. It brought a whole new audience to it. And we loved whether writers are trying things out for the first time, or getting work out there for the first time, or they have a career behind them, giving them a chance for their work to be seen in a way that they are proud of it. We did My Favorite Year by Lynn Ahrens and Stephen Flaherty, and they just felt it so captured what the show was about in this very simple Mufti production. The same thing with I hope you're going to edit this. Lucky Stiff. Lucky Stiff, that had been very successful at Playwrights in its original production. They just thought what was done with it in the very simple Mufti staging captured it so much more clearly that they wanted a recording made. And so I think it was less than 10 years after the original, a new recording of our production of Lucky Stiff was made, because they just thought it was the show much more than maybe the original recording was. So anyway, we've had a lot of experiences with writers like that, both well-known and up-and-coming writers. And I think we're really a writer's theater. We pride ourselves on our relationship with writers, and the complication until the recent year, complication has just been finding the funding to make shows happen. There are a lot of shows out there that deserve to be done. Finding the funding to help them happen is always tricky. And we have a wonderfully supportive board, and have always had a wonderfully supportive board, but it takes a lot of money. And we work sometimes with commercial producers to make shows happen, or friends of the authors who believe in a show make tax-deductible contributions to make a show happen. There was even a show that was paid for by a math foundation because they were so impressed with the educational potential of this particular show. It's called Fermat's Last Tango by
Josh Rosenblum.
Josh Rosenblum and Joanne Lesner. Is that on your label?
Yes, and I also Zoomed with him recently.
Oh, you did? Oh, yeah, they're wonderful. And they found the Clay Math Foundation, which said this is incredibly educational. They helped pay for the production, and then they gave an extra grant to video it. A lot of shows we can do an archival video that we can show to friends in-house. Occasionally we get permission to show it to a wider audience, but this was fully contracted all the way around so it can be actually sold to the public, because they felt it was a wonderful educational tool because of the subject matter and the way the story was told. So there are all sorts of things, and I've come up with the ideas of shows because I figured out where the funding could come from to do them. And that's part of I guess that's a wonderful thing to take credit for or to make happen. Anyway.
When did Mufti's and the readings happen? Did they happen about the same time? Or?
No, the readings began sooner. The readings, I think, began maybe late 80s up at Heavenly Rest. Mark Leonard Simmons, I believe, began that series. And we moved to St. Peter's in 1992, and the Mufti's began in 1994. Coincidentally, it's the same year that Encores began. There was no cause and effect, and we weren't even aware of Encores at the time. Actually, I'm blanking on a name. Anyway, a series was done at our space uptown called Musicals in Concert. And Janet, and then I think it didn't continue. And Janet took that idea and said, I think we should do shows in concert, shows that deserve a second look. And she and her husband, Charlie, and I met at their apartment on West 96th Street. I guess this was maybe 93. And one of the things was coming up with the title. And Charlie had been in the Navy, and the word mufti, or mufti as it's said in Arabic, mufti meant something to him, meaning out of uniform. Yeah, I saw so-and-so walking down the street the other day. He was in mufti. And I honestly, if I'd heard, I'm sure I'd heard the word, but I wasn't really aware of it. And we decided that would be the name. All sorts of people over the years have said, you've got to change that name. But I think we've done more to make people aware of that word and what it means than anyone else in the world. And so that was 94. We hit number 100 about 5 or 6 years ago. Number 100 in the series was Saturday night, Sondheim's Saturday Night. And I think we're up to 118 or 19 now.
What about the readings? About how many readings?
And the readings, we've done something like 5, somewhere up around 600 readings over the years.
And this is something where people can basically see it without putting any money significantly at all, and just sort of give a place?
Well, it's been done different ways. It's been done different ways depending on the whims of equity. I have to get this. That's the doorman calling.
Okay. I'll talk about you. Go and get something. I'll talk about you while you're gone.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
let's just leave it alone. That's just not, I don't know who it is.
So what were some of the early readings?
I haven't thought of that in a while.
I think that Was Avenue Q, was there a reading of Avenue Q at one time?
Oh, Avenue Q was not one of the earliest by any means. It was in the early. It was in the. Janet passed away in '97. It was sometime after that, maybe 2000 or something like that. But yeah, we did 3 readings of Avenue Q early on. I would guess we had done 150 readings at that point, 100 or 150 at that point. But Avenue Q, we did 3 readings of it. And I talked to the guys afterwards and I said, I think this has a lot of potential. I'd love to work with you on it to make it into something. And they said, oh, no, this isn't for theater. This is for television. And then 3 years later, with a different director and a book writer, there was no book when we did it. It was done at the Vineyard. And they've always said since, please take credit for doing the first readings. We're sorry you don't have a piece of it. That's just the way it worked out. And we don't ask for, when we do a reading of something, we don't grab a piece of the show. Maybe that's a big business flaw, but we don't think it's right to
It would discourage some people.
Encumber a piece just from doing a reading. What?
It would discourage some people if they had a little reputation. They said, well, I don't want to find taking West Side Story and giving you 10%.
It's different when we do a full. It's different when we do a full production of something. When we do, particularly the first production of something, we ask for the usual amount, 1%, 1.5%, and people are totally understanding. So there was something else in there that you asked. I just forgot about it.
But when did they start to record? Talk about doing Mata Hari, since I was involved in that. What do you remember about Mata Hari and the reading? And
well, Mata Hari was from the first, I think it was the first or certainly the second season of the Muftis. A famously problematic Broadway show. And
it's produced by David Merrick. Produced by David Merrick,
yes.
And it closed in Washington. It was going to be recorded by RCA and all these things, and it did not leave Washington.
And then it was revived off Broadway, I think at the Theatre de Lys,
yes.
called Ballad for a Firing Squad.
Right.
And I don't think it did a whole lot better then, but it didn't close out of town at least. But we had gotten to know Ed Thomas, the composer, on 6 Wives that we had done before that, I believe. Yeah. And he's a really nice guy, wonderfully talented. And through that, got to know Martin Charnin. And Janet was running the theater then. I was out of town. I guess I saw one performance of the show and thought it had potential. And then suddenly Janet said, oh, you should go meet with Martin Charnin. We're going to do a full production of Mata Hari next year. And it was not an easy experience. A wonderfully talented cast. And I just thought there was a wonderful show there that Martin, as the director, didn't really find. It's a gorgeous score. And I don't know whether he was so intent on trying to save this piece that he cared so much about that had been maligned over the years or had gotten a bad reputation over the years. And I think he was too close to it. I think it could have been better, but hindsight's always.
Let's see what happened. I went to see it, and I had done a couple projects with Martin Charnin, and I said, "Oh, I'd like to record Mata Hari." He said, "You'd have to pay the actors." I said, "No, I would be willing to pay the actors. I don't usually get free actors. I did what I called great songs from not so great shows that had a song from Mata Hari, and he provided actors who were his friends. But I said, no, I'm willing to pay a moderate amount. And so I don't remember the name of the original Mata Hari, but she had just come to New York from Montreal, I go Canada in anyway. And so we announced we wanted to record it right away. And she said, well, I really want to go back to Canada. I don't want to. And Martin Charnin said, if she doesn't want to be in this recording, we'll just get rid of her. So I said, well, who might play Mata Hari if we need him? And he said, I can probably get you B.B. Newworth. And he mentioned some other well-known people. So we recorded the show without a Mata Hari. And I kept saying, where's the Mata Hari? And then there came a time that Keith Levinson, you remember Keith Levinson?
Right.
Piano player and arranger, wonderful arranger of the material. He said, Martin wants the same woman. Do you remember the wife? She was a wonderful actress.
Robin Skye?
Yes, Robin Skye. He said, Martin wants Robin to be the wife and Mata Hari. And I said, gee, that's pretty unusual because there's a conflict between, but on the record, I guess he said that's what Martin wants. And if I were you, I would let him in. And she sounds somewhat different, though. We do, I think, give credit to her playing most part, and no one has really brought that up. I guess not a significant thing, but I really love.
But now you recorded it before we did the full production. You recorded the Mufti cast, because when we did the production, it was Marguerite McIntyre playing Mata Hari.
I loved her. I wish I could have used her personally. I loved her as an actress, and she was.
And I forget what other cast changes there were, but and it was a fuller anyway. For some reason, you're right. Martin wanted to rush it through and get it out there.
We tried for a couple of performances, I believe, to use the tracks from the recording, but that proved to be difficult. So we went back to Keith Levinson playing on the piano and maybe bass and drums.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I would advise anyone who likes musical theater to hear the recording that I make. Synthesizer. Yeah. You really need to know how to use a synthesizer, because if you try strings all by themselves, that does not sound like real strings. But it's okay in the background and things like that. So Keith Levinson did a wonderful job of that. And
Martin was an amazing lyricist. I really think he hasn't gotten the proper credit for that side of his career.
There's a song in Annie Warbooks called It Would Have Been Wonderful. And it supposes that what this could have been, it would have go through the possibilities of we could have done this. And it's just as hard because you realize it doesn't happen, but it could have happened. And to me, that's just wonderful. I said, when you write a lyric like that, do you know that this is a great lyric? He said, yes, I do know it's a great lyric.
Yeah. There are a number of songs over the years that I hear and say, that is amazing. Who wrote that? And find out it's him. Anyway,
we tried to do
a great friend of the company. And
we tried to do a recording. Did you ever consider doing the first? Did he ever talk about it?
Yeah, we talked about it. When I talked about the Muftis, and it's made up of shows that should have gotten more attention. He said, you could do a whole Martin Charnin season. And he said, what about the first? And we talked about it a couple of times, and it just somehow never happened. I think one of the things I was out of the Mata Hari experience, the worry that he might want to direct it, and the whole thing about how close he was to the material. But anyway, a great guy and a great friend, and a wonderful town. And there are probably all sorts of other shows of his. Oh, there was something we were just talking about the other day. Now, do you know the Gin Game, the musical?
I saw that at Goodspeed. I would not be overly excited about the process. It did not work well at Goodspeed, so I think it would require.
I don't know it at all.
It's, I think,
but
one or both of the guys who wrote Martin directed it. He did not write any of it, I don't believe. And it was at least one of the guys who wrote Maggie Flynn, Hugo or Luigi.
Right.
And
yeah.
It just, I'd seen the. It's a memorable play, not a memorable musical. But I would come to see it, as other people would probably come to see it. You got the Kind Daly and who knows.
Well, actually, where it came up was in the conversation about Sweeney Todd. Bob Gunton said, I would love to work with Beth Fowler. He was talking about the number of times they had worked together over their careers and how wonderful Sweeney was, because it was sort of the perfect cap to all of those collaborations. And he said, maybe there's one other thing we could do. Maybe there's a musical version of the Gin Game. I said, well, there actually is one. I told him about it. He said, I'd be open to trying it. And there was a whole discussion about it. Charles Wright looked into it, and I can't imagine people playing cards, which was one of the conceits, I guess. Is that correct?
Yes. I don't remember the particulars, but yes.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. What else can I enlighten you about?
Maybe talk about some other things that I recorded. There's going to be a shelter evening also on YouTube.
Yeah, I've just had a wonderful conversation with Gretchen Cryer and Nancy Ford about their career. And there are a number of shows of theirs that people just don't know and should know. And this is an attempt to sort of give an overview of their amazing career. And we've just finished editing it. And I think it's turned out very well. I think we're going to stream it next week, the 16th. No, that's not the 16th, the 21st. Anyway, sometime soon it's going to be streamed on the York Theater YouTube channel.
I saw a production of the sort of sequel to I'm Getting My Act Together. What's that called? Getting Back Together.
It's called The Last Sweet Days.
No. They're Getting My Act Together, where they take Gretchen.
Still Getting My Act Together.
Okay, still, yeah. I thought that had that to me had a lot of potential.
I agree. And, I think that's something that could be recorded. I would love to. They have now worked a way to. Well, when we did the first time out of Still Getting My Act Together, we did it in rep with Getting My Act Together. And the sequel is the same characters, or most of the same characters, 30 years later. And it was fascinating to see. It was clearly a work in development when we did it. They since did a production of it at Laguna and one somewhere else. And then we did a reading of it, what is close to final version as part of our 50th anniversary legacy series a year and a half ago. And it had changed completely in a wonderful way. I mean, they had really thought it through and learned what worked and what didn't and how it should better relate to the original. And that's what's wonderful to see smart writers saying, oh, this is why this doesn't work. Or, oh, we could, oh, look at, if we do this, what this does. And giving people of any experience the chance to do that is what I love to do. Giving them a stage where they can see something up in front of an audience, maybe for the first time ever, or maybe for the second time, coming back to it a year later and saying, I've made these tweaks along the way. Let's see if it makes a difference. And being able to see that it does, in most cases, make a wonderful difference. There are sad stories about people whose first time out with a show is just electric. And I've seen this happen a few times, and they keep working on it, and the second time is not as good. They have, for whatever reason, taken it in the wrong direction. And I'm always willing to give advice, but who am I to tell them what they should write? They know what they're trying to write. So I love giving them the chance to do it, and it may not work. So then they go back to the drawing board. And there was a show that we did 4 times that sort of dipped the second time, got better the third time, and the fourth time really took off. But it's because they had that opportunity for the repeat experience with an audience, with our audience. Our audiences are wonderfully supportive and wonderfully knowledgeable, and very few of them are the New York, well, prove this works. They want it to work. And there'll be times I come out of a reading and I'm going, oh, I don't know what happened there. I thought that really had potential and something didn't work. And people will come up to me and say, that was incredible. That's one of the best things you've ever done. So that's one of the joys, is having different opinions about, different people having different opinions about the same piece because of their background, their take on life, and their take on that piece.
Let's talk a little about Bach and Harnick, because you've done a lot of that, and I was lucky enough to get to do The Body Beautiful. So
yes, that was one of those great experiences. But as I said, the first musical we ever did was She Loves Me, and that began our friendship and relationship with him. We did the Apple Tree a few years later in the full production. Bob Nigro directed it. Kathy Marath and John Jellison were the leads. What else? Then
in recent times you did The Rothschilds, which
has
the new version that's been produced in London. And
Rothschild and Sons, which is not the Rothschilds. It's very different. It's much condensed. It's focusing on the family itself as opposed to all the stuff swirling around the family in the original. The original was a very successful, big Broadway show with, I don't know, a cast of 40 or something. This is a cast of, I think, 10. And it was really came about through the efforts of Arnold Middleman, who used to run Coconut Grove, and Jeff Moss. We had done Rothschilds, the original, the Rothschilds at Coconut Grove that I designed in, I don't know, 92 or something like that Jeff directed. And they had always had this idea that there was a smaller show hidden in that big one. And they kept returning to that idea, and Jerry passed away, but they kept talking with Sheldon about it, and Sherman Yellen, who wrote the book, and out of it came Rothschild and Sons, and it did very well with us. A wonderful recording. Your friend John Yap, it's on his label. And then, as you said, it was done in London after we did it, and many further refinements happened then. So there's really kind of a whole new show whole new version of that show since we did it. We've talked about maybe doing that because it's kind of amazing that anti-Semitism is still so prevalent today. You'd think at some point the world could grow up and get beyond things like that, but clearly it's a lesson that still needs to be taught. And this is not only entertaining, but there's an educational element to it, a wonderfully inspiring story with some wonderful lessons in it. So I'm very proud we did that.
On The Body Beautiful, were they eager to do that? Or
oh, and The Body Beautiful came out of the Mufti series. We were doing a Sheldon Harnick series of 5 shows of his, and we wanted to do a Bach and Harnick, and the one that we had never done and it was never done was The Body Beautiful, which had also never been recorded. David Glenn Armstrong directed it and worked with Sheldon, and they sort of found a way to tell the story more very cleanly. But it's a great score. The score is what got them the job of writing Fiddler on the Roof. Hal Prince heard it. Oh no, it was not a Sheldon series. It was the Joe Stein series. I just thought Joe Stein wrote the book. Very funny book about a boxer and his love life. Anyway, and Hal Prince went to see it and loved the score so much that he hired them to do Fiddler on the Roof. Or that's the story I was told.
They were given a right to write 3 or 4 songs, and I've heard Sheldon.
That what it was? Yeah.
Sheldon tell the story that he's looking at Hal Prince, and Hal Prince does not seem to be interested. And then they played. What's the big song? Till to Tomorrow. And Hal Prince said, "That's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to have you guys write it based on that song. If you can do more songs like that."
Wow.
But had they not written Till Tomorrow, presumably other people would have gotten it. But I think Bach and Harnick would have done well with other people down the line. But it's
without
nice.
What?
Down the line, they would have written other shows. It's not like that was their only chance to have written a musical. And but it had. You could think for these things, you can get really good people to do it because it's for such a short time.
Yeah.
That there's no commitment, and generally they're happy enough to record their roles for one of the You've been recorded by almost every label, all the smaller labels, Maurice, and who else has recorded your stuff?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
I said a lot of small labels like mine have recorded your shows. So how many recordings do you think you have in all? 50 or more?
Oh, we have, it's just approaching 50. I think it's like 47, 48. And it all started with Merrily We Roll Along. That was the first recording in 1994. And I thought, oh, this is really nice, our first recording. It didn't dawn on me what having a recording, particularly at that time, meant to a small company such as ours in terms of getting the word out about what we're doing. Because it wasn't until 3 years later that Janet passed away and I became artistic director, and I changed the mission to only musicals without a big announcement. We never said, from now on, we're only doing this. We just started doing only musicals. And as we began having recordings, as you said, on various labels, it helped our visibility in an incredible way. And interns would come in and say, so this is the stage where little by little happened. I can't believe it. I've listened to that over and over in my college dorm room. And I'm so excited to be on the stage where that happened. And the idea that people around the world, around the country, knew us because of these recordings that were beginning to get out there is incredible. I think we probably have more recordings than any other theater in the world. That is not a carefully researched statement.
I would certainly think so. I would certainly think so.
But I'll put it out there until someone refutes it with proof.
Anything by Sheldon you haven't done? I don't believe there is.
Well, we did do a Sheldon series. Body Beautiful.
He did his.
What was not
Russian? What was the Russian?
Oh, we did
play?
Dragons. Yeah,
Dragons.
which I had designed the original production of at the National Opera Institute in 1991 maybe at City Center Stage 1.
And originally it had a score by Hal Schaffer. Milton Schaffer, who did Drat the Cat and Bravo Giovanni.
Schaefer. Oh yeah.
And then Sheldon said,
"Oh, that's right."
At WAMU, I have a lot of the WAMU shows, and he and Larry Grossman wrote like 50 songs. Well, he said WAMU because they didn't have one writer. I mean, a lot of Harvard and Princeton, a lot of them have one writer or very few writers. At Northwestern, anybody, if you're going there, and after you're gone, they say, we need a number, Sheldon. So 20, 30 years later, he would contribute a song. That's the kind of guy Sheldon is. You just want a good song that...
He's an amazing writer. And you look at some of his early review songs, like the Boston Beguine, and then some of the things later on, like, Dragons, things he wrote on his own. The breadth of his creativity is just amazing. For him to be 97 and still writing is kind of amazing. I had the pleasure of doing a wonderful conversation with him and Margie a little while back, leading up to his 97th birthday. We streamed the concert that we did a year ago, well, over a year ago now. The last thing we did in our theater before we shut down for the pandemic. It was called An Evening with Sheldon Harnick and Friends. And it was Sheldon, Karen Ziemba, Liz Calloway, and Rebecca Luker in her final stage appearance. And it was, of course, no one knew that at the time, but it's a beautiful evening. And Margie sings on it as well. She comes on at the end and sings a special guest cameo appearance. It's a really touching show. We put it out on Broadway on Demand for his 97th birthday. And I added a conversation that I'd had with him and Margie in their apartment a few weeks before. And it was a wonderful statement to put out about him and us and American musical theater and where we are today after all of this we've been through.
I still am interested. I love, what did you call your Harnick review? What that was called?
A World to Win.
Okay. I loved Carrie Conti. And I want to do an album of Carrie Conti singing something, Will He Like Me? I really was moved to tears when she sang that song. She said that.
You're going to do an album of her?
I am trying to, I'm trying to actually reach John Bell. John Bell seems a little elusive. I don't know.
I might be able to help you. I don't know. I don't know if I have the most recent contact.
And I said to Sheldon, would you sing some songs on the album? Of course I would, Bruce.
Great. He also said when we come back, whenever that is, wherever that is, he would be happy to do that concert again for us. He had fun doing it, and to have him say that means a whole lot. So
it's interesting because for the recording of The Body Beautiful, there was somebody who dropped out, or and we needed another singer. So John Bell said, I know a singer, wonderful singer named Carrie Conti, and she has some wonderful high notes. And
She's amazing.
so we did, and I didn't pay that much attention to her at the recording, but then afterwards I saw her in that review. I said, oh, she's just an incredible singer, and she goes out with White Christmas and Mary Poppins. She's both Mary Poppins and one of the sisters in White Christmas, and she did a little career. Then she does the encore series too. So she's willing to play almost any part. She didn't say, "Oh, this is the lead part," but so I would hope that
she's one of those people that deserves lots of great things to happen, like an album. So if you can make that happen, that would be great.
That's what I would like that happen.
Maybe it can be recorded on stage at the York. Speaking of that, you probably want to know what we're doing since we had the big flood in January and we're moved out of our longtime space at St. Peter's. Whether we go back remains to be seen, but we have, because nothing has been done to repair it. So we have to move forward. We have shows to do, and happily there are lots of people who want to do shows with us. So we will be doing this fall, probably in November, the full production that we were ready to do when we shut down last year. It's called Cheek to Cheek, Irving Berlin in Hollywood. It's conceived, directed, and choreographed by Randy Skinner, who's never worked off Broadway before. Fabulous choreographer and director. Booked by Barry Kleinbord, and it's all the songs that Irving Berlin, or all the great songs that Irving Berlin wrote for the movies. Cast of 6, tapping and everything their hearts away. And a fabulous group of people I'm not allowed to announce at this point, but we are hoping that all the people that were lined up to do it when we almost did it last year will be available again. So we're excited about that. We have a space to do it. I don't think, well, yeah, I can tell. It will be at the theater at St. John Baptiste at 76 in Lexington, the former Da Capo Opera Space. 76 in Lexington, a beautiful theater, slightly bigger than our theater we've become known for 30 years at St. Peter's. And we're excited to be there. We have a couple of other events there happening in the fall. Our 50th anniversary concert finally will happen in September 20th. And the concert of Blue Roses, the musical of The Glass Menagerie by Mimi Turk and Nancy Ford, which we've been trying to do for a while, will happen in October at that same space at 76 in Lexington. We'll also have readings of several new shows leading up to Cheek to Cheek in November. So we got a lot going on. And we have shows lined up for next year too. We just have to find, if we're not going to be at St. Peter's, we need to find a regular space to be in where people will know that's our home. I don't want to be in this position of moving around from theater to theater, because I've seen several theaters go under because people never knew where they were. And we have been lucky. And again, if we can return to St. Peter's, we'd love to. If we can't, for whatever reason, we will find a place. And we may need help finding a space. If you know of a space that would be stunning match for us, maybe a theater now, it may be able to be turned into a theater with the proper design expertise put to work. But we're looking very much forward to getting back to having a home where audiences know where we are and know that that's
You had a problem when you were at the Church of Heavenly Rest that there was also a basketball court.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, there were many wonderful things about it and less wonderful things, particularly as we got bigger. And in Heavenly Rest at that time, there was us, but we were actually a part of Heavenly Rest. We were an arm of it because Charlie Walker was the organist and Janet, he ran the Canterbury Choral Society, which was there at Heavenly Rest, and Janet started York, which was officially an arm of Heavenly Rest, which was good because we didn't pay rent, less good because there were places that wouldn't fund us because we were technically a religious organization. So it wasn't until we moved to St. What am I supposed to do? I hope you're going to edit this because you're going to have someone edit this.
One other thing I wanted to go over, we're nearing the conclusion. I think you and I could probably talk for 5 hours, but
yeah, I would love to. We can always do this again.
Yes, we certainly can.
But
tell us about your involvement with Smith and Jones.
Oh, well, that came about because of our production of 110 in the Shade in I think it was 81. Fran Soder directed it. Bare bones, simple, and wonderfully successful. Jan Pisano, Bob Stockel, other wonderful people whose names are on the tip of my tongue. A great production. And Tom and Harvey came to see it and loved it. And like a year later, they brought us, Colette had just closed out of town unsuccessfully, unhappily in Denver with Diana Rigg. And they brought us a show loosely related to that called Colette Collage. And we ended up doing the premiere of that, got a lot of attention, and that became a long time friendship and relationship with them as writers and as personal friends of mine and the company. And Janet Watson, Tom's wife, was a wonderful choreographer who did a lot of shows, did those shows, a lot of their shows for us, and other shows, not by them. She and I worked together as director, choreographer a number of times. And just was a wonderful friend. She has since passed away. But our relationship with Jones and Schmidt and their work has been one of our hallmarks, and very proud of it. There's still, I mean, we did a Tom Jones Mufti series shortly after we did the Sheldon one, and 5 shows of his, including Colette Collage, Celebration. What?
The Philemon?
No, we didn't do Philemon in that series. We had done Philemon as a full production a number of years before. But we did shows that Tom did not write with Harvey, including, I wish I had the list in front of me. With Nancy Ford, The Game of Love.
I saw that in Provincetown. I drove up to Provincetown to see that one summer.
And Harold and Maude was another one. And that's one of the shows I truly believe should have a much larger life. There was a rights issue for a while. We actually announced a full production of it, I don't know how many years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. We're selling tickets for 6 months, and suddenly this rights issue came to.
Well, originally it was Billy Goldenberg, and it wasn't.
Yeah, we did a reading of that.
It wasn't that great a score. Billy's no longer with us.
Yeah.
But
Joe Falcon came on as composer, and it's incredible. It's a beautiful show. And what is amazing, how they have kept talking about work being done on a show. Very careful pruning away and figuring out how to tell the story more clearly and concisely, and through productions. There was a very big production that I saw that it was not good for. Again, the theater was way too big for it, and it hurt the show because they were trying to make it bigger to fill that space. And then it was done in other theaters that I didn't see, but they have kept working on it. And we've done several different readings of it. We did it in the Muftis, and they've got it pretty much where it's perfect. And it's a cast of 4 or 5. It's 4. It's been a while since I've thought about it. But anyway, it is one of the perfect shows, and it should be being done around the country. It has such heart and such life lessons in it that I would be so excited if we could make a full production of it happen, and a real, actual, official recording. It's one of the shows that just deserves it. Tom and Harvey and their work have been a part of the York from, well, for however many years it is, 1981 to now. Oh, that would be like 50 years, wouldn't it?
Yeah. 40 years. That's
Really?
Still a long time, yes.
It's a long, anyway.
You didn't see Fermat's Last Tango, you know your math.
Yes, true, yeah. Anyway, what else do we have to cover?
Well, I
Is that it for
wondered
this?
well, just we're almost done. What is your idea of what can happen in commercial theater? You like to see happen what?
I don't know that I'm the person to ask. I've become less and less excited by most commercial theater over the years. First of all, it's so expensive, which makes it into something that only certain people can afford to see. And that's just a fact.
I've been told now all the seats, except like 2 rows in most theaters, are $199. And of course, for the big shows, $800. They said, well, you could take out a loan and pay it off like you buy a car to see Hamilton or Music Man.
And there are very few shows that I'm aware of that are worth that. I would much rather. I like what we do. I like the scale of what we do. I like the affordability of the tickets. I would love to give all our tickets away. If someone ever wants to make a grant to us where we could do that, that would be wonderful. But you
do share, like students, there are free tickets.
We give tickets to students, we give tickets to seniors, and if you catch me at the right moment, I will give tickets to anyone that I can afford to, because I want our shows to be seen and enjoyed. And I just believe that the joy that people can get from watching a show that's well done, even the show that's not particularly well done, there is a joy to be found there. And part of our job is to find the audience for the shows that we do. Not every show is for every audience. And a lot of people think, well, if you just get the word out, people will come. No, they may come and they may hate it. It's being able to educate the audience, or by getting the word out about what a show is, finding the perfect audience for that show. And they will therefore come and really have a great time and bring others of their ilk who will have an equally good time. So anyway, I'm not really the person to talk about commercial theater. I admire people who can do it. There's not a lot of it that I've seen in recent years that I was overjoyed by. The joy is often missing. You admire the technical stuff, you admire the effort it took to make it, the money that was spent on it, but very seldom have I been brought to a state of joy by a commercial production.
So we owe you a debt of gratitude for keeping so many shows alive and getting them recorded, and just being a great producer and friend of musical comedy. We owe you many, many,
Well,
many thanks.
I appreciate that, but I've had a lot of help. Our board is incredibly supportive. Our staff has been really wonderful over the years, and staff changes happen, and amazingly we go on. We find new wonderful people to work with, and so having people to rely on who help create the magic that people appreciate is a lot of the game, and we have that all over again. We have a great group of people working with us, and we just can't wait to get back in a regular space where people can find us and see what we do and appreciate it all over again.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing you personally and some of our other your fans that I see periodically at these shows.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Bruce.
Okay.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Okay.
A great pleasure. See you.